Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4 of From Bits to Bots. This video will be a quick one as episode 3 got a little bit long, and as we're nearly done with our focus on the coding side of this series. Go back to episode 2 for a basic IDE setup and Arduino orientation, or episode 3 for an in-depth look at tips for debugging. This episode will focus on mostly the reference library, where we'll just scratch the surface of talking about all the various things you can code your Arduino to do. The reference library can be found at arduino.cc/reference, and it'll bring you to this page here. This page is divided up into 3 sections: functions, variables, and structures, where functions are for controlling your Arduino board and performing different computations. Variables are the different data types and constraints that you can add to your code. And structures are the different elements of that code. Now, if those descriptions are about as clear as mud, you're in good company because they meant nothing to me when I first looked at them. But what was really helpful was just diving into some of these things and reading about what they do. And so that's kind of what I want to do, is walk you through some of these different pieces on this page. If we look at some of the functions, you'll see some of these look kind of familiar. Things like digital read or analog write or serial. And we can look at any one of those and find out more about what they do. If I click on serial, it'll bring me to a page that tells me all about what the serial library is. In this case, it tells me all the different serial pins that are available, the different USB ports that I can connect to, the different types of boards that I can use, as well as describes what each of those things do. But the most important piece of this for me was the functions library that is included in serial. You see, serial is this library of different functions that you can use to do different things. For example, if we want to add an if statement, or if we want to begin a serial code, or things like serial read or write that we've used in previous videos. If you want my advice, I would just go in and read about some of these different functions that you can do within serial, as it'll give you a better idea of all the different things you can potentially add to your code. Next, we're going to look at some of the variables that are available to you to use within your code. Some of the common ones are like float, int, char, array, or boolean. Now, you may have seen in some of our previous videos where I've used int to establish a variable, or you may have seen array in just some of the different examples that we've used online. If we click on int, you'll see that it converts a value into a data type, meaning we could take, in the case of the last video, I could take a value like cool and turn it into data, or of 10. Char then does the opposite of that. So char allows me to take some data and turn it into a character. So I could take that 10 and turn it into cool. A few of the others that are used a lot of times are array, boolean, and byte, and I would highly encourage you to check those out as you go. Another word that comes up a lot is scope, and so defining scope within your data set may be really helpful to you. Variables within the Arduino language have a property called scope. This means that they have a range that they can work within. There are 2 different types of variables. There are global variables that can be seen in every function of a program, and then there are local variables that are only specific to certain functions. There are pros and cons to both, but understanding the scope of those variables is important for how you might use your code. The last variable we'll focus on is the string variable. This allows you to format your variables as a sequence of characters, meaning you're able to do all sorts of different things, including taking your data and turning it into an easily understandable string of characters or numbers or integers or variables that can be used in some sort of data output. The final part of the reference library are the structures. And if you're looking at the structures, you may off the bat notice 2 that are very common that we've talked a lot about: loop and setup. So we probably don't need to check those out, but if you want to know more about what their differences are, how you can use them, what things you can include in them, check out loop and setup here. Other control structures that come up are different commands that you want to give, like if or return or switch in this case, or else, and those pop up here as well. Finally, I would encourage you to check out some of the different arithmetic and comparison features that you can add to your code, as it's really helpful once you get into some of your more complex codes that come up. So being able to add or subtract or divide, as well as set things equal to another function, is really helpful. So that's the end of episode 4. Hopefully you found these episodes helpful in understanding how some of the setup of the Arduino IDE actually works and some of the different ways that you can manipulate the things as you set it up. Obviously, there's a whole lot more out there than just what I've gone over in these 3 videos, so please explore more and let us know what questions you have or what content you'd love to see more of. Beginning next week, we're going to start actually building with our Arduinos. So there'll be less on the code itself, though obviously we'll have to use that, and more on what the physical technology looks like to make some of this happen. Specifically, our challenge for next week is going to be on moving a character like one of those old two-dimensional video games. So if you think you know how, or you want to try to get a jump start on it, your challenge for the next week is to design an Arduino setup that would control a two-dimensional sprite or video game character and make it move from side to side. I'll show you next week how that actually works.